January 8th, there was an event occurring. I understood it was an anniversary. Somebody had made a request of me. They had requested that I assist them with a proceeding they were going through regarding custody of their children. This was the second time since I've been in the state of Texas that somebody has asked me to assist them with trying to figure out how to represent themselves pro se in a custody proceeding. Now, I filed at one point with another person a series of motions and responses in conjunction with ones she filed, and I offered to be a expert witness for a woman that was going through a custody proceeding, and this included a submission of motions to the Supreme Court of Texas that are still, as last time I checked, which was since the beginning of this year, available on the Supreme Court of Texas website. There were other proceedings that had been gone through. There were other things that had happened. My efforts to contact that person are fruitless. I've not been able to contact her in years, even though during that time frame there have been ongoing public notices of activity concerning that case, including public notices of activity concerning that case that represent as if there was still a proceeding in which she was participating. But I've not been able to contact her directly. I've not been able to get any response from her, even though I witnessed what they did at the time, and I continue, even to this day, to witness what they did to her and her children during that proceeding. Now, this other person is someone I had not met previously. Somebody asked if I would be willing to speak to her. I spoke to her. I have all of the documentation I need about what it meant to speak with her and what the implications were. It was a custody proceeding involving 3 minor male children, and a concern regarding the origin of her birth certificate and the relationship status between her and her husband, and a effort for her mother, or her adopted mother, a woman who had adopted her and identified as her mother, to try to get custody of her children from her. And part of the acknowledgement of the potential justification for this person to have custody as opposed to her had to do with access to health insurance this woman, her adopted mother, had in consideration of her past work history, including access to benefits associated with her pension fund. And the understanding was that because she had access to the means by which to take care of the children, and the mother did not, she was better suited to be in custody of those children. Now, on January 8th, my understanding is somebody was running some sort of derivative process connected to that. I went through, I talked with the woman, I came up with a response that I believed would have actually been able to justify her case and would be able to have addressed the matters in a way that would have precluded anybody from taking custody from her. But for whatever reason, I was not able to contact her again. She did not respond to my phone calls. She did not respond to my efforts to talk to her. She never showed back up in order to discuss matters with me. And my understanding is around the time that the proceeding that had already been scheduled to occur, her children were removed from her custody and given over to the woman who had adopted her and identified as her mother for many years, despite the fact that this same woman did not go through the legal process of assuring that her daughter had appropriate legal documentations of citizenship in the United States. I was a witness to this, if nothing else. I came up with the motion in order to discuss this with her. I got all the permissions. I even got specific information, sat down with her. I wasn't going to do anything on her behalf without her, but I was a witness to this, and it was serious crime. And it's panned out. It's panned out. I said in the course of that, my understanding is that somebody was simulating military legal process. Now, I don't care who they are. They may well be a military veteran. They may well be a former JAG officer. I don't give a shit if you're on the National Security Council. Who were you to think it was okay to traffic a woman's children as leveraging in consideration of the paradigm you allowed that woman and her children to be trafficked in connection with. I contend that it's also possible her husband was, or her ex husband was trafficked as well. As for the woman who tried to go through the devious measures she did to acquire custody, this is another matter. Grandma, right? Grandmother has a very specific positioning in these kinds of hedge funds, don't they? Now, you know, we're in the situation we're in. Nobody responded technically and literally within 72 hours. But February 8th, 2021 would have been 31 days since I originally was on a current understanding there were concurrent processes associated with the manipulation of that woman's case. It just so happens a company for whom that grandmother worked and had her pension benefits provided to her has been in the news lately in some trouble. As a matter of fact, they're under investigation. These are very serious matters. Nobody seemed to take it seriously at the time. They preferred to do something else rather than addressing the actual matter at hand. This is the second time I have seen a woman who was not born in the United States have her children trafficked for a gas and oil company or in connection with people who receive benefits from gas and oil companies as part of an alleged nuclear paradigm. Both times, the merits of the case would not have actually legitimized removing those children from the mother's custody. Both times, what lawyers and judges allowed to have put on the record was completely unjustified. Now, I have not followed up on the formal case information with this second woman, but I did follow up with the formal case information for the first woman. It went all the way to the level of the President of the United States. For over 3 years, it's still at that level. And in both cases, the lawyers and the judges, those esteemed members of bar associations, putting their names and barcodes on the documents associated with this trafficking scheme, have made very poor decisions and have failed to follow up in a manner that takes responsibility for the gravity of the engagement they allowed these matters to be performed. What right did they have to ignore the explicit requirements of the matter directly before them, intentionally deny people access to a means by which to have justice in pursuit of due process, and take minor children that are actually born citizens of the United States and allow them to be trafficked as part of speculation connected to pension racketeering, as well as leveraging in consideration of nuclear benchmarks that in both cases were failed. See, they took it there. They lied to these women. They trafficked their children. They committed an egregious abuse of justice and violated the judicial process in the explicit acts they engaged relative to what they purported to be doing as lawyers and judges. And they did it for what aim? They allowed for other people's literal rights to be sacrificed in a scheme to up-leverage. And even if they thought they had the power or the authority to do that, they did it poorly. They sacrificed those children in a horrible, terrible manner with an absolute understanding it was going to have a material impact on other children and other mothers. This is an escalation and a specific kind of concentration of what I witnessed when I was in that domestic violence shelter in Pasadena, Texas. I watched as they intentionally breached what were necessary public safety codes and requirements in consideration of getting the kind of access to funding sources that they had access to, including funding sources that are appropriated through the federal budget process. They violated the explicit literal requirements of what they were doing or alleging to do in providing the services they claim to be providing to those mothers and their children as part of a up-leveraging for what? What I saw was a radio tower far too close to a daycare center. A daycare center that was allowing itself to be used as an asset for a temporary labor agency down the street that not only provided temporary jobs at gas and oil refineries within that vicinity, but that also had another branch involving temporary employment services for the financial sector and the banking sector. Why would a temporary labor agency be allowed to claim a child care center at a domestic violence shelter as an asset under classification of being a sponsor? Why would a temporary labor agency be a sponsor of a child care center in a domestic violence shelter? Who allowed for this to happen? Who allowed for petrochem companies to be sponsors of the individual family rooms of mothers and their children at domestic violence shelters? Who allowed for companies that provide automation services for the gas and oil sector to be sponsors of individual family rooms for women and their children at a domestic violence shelter? That's just the explicit, literal problems. Who allows for the electrical engineer at a weapons factory to be the president of the board of directors of a domestic violence shelter where women and children are kept in rooms that are designated as assets of petrochem companies and companies that provide automation services for the gas and oil sector? These are very direct, literal questions. Every single woman in that shelter had a right to have them answered. She did not have an expectation of making it confidential after they compelled her to force drug her children in order to keep custody of them and or go get some medical treatment, including medical treatment that was necessitated based upon the use of radio frequency to break her bones on site. This happened. Why? What were you doing with those women and children instead of assisting them in escaping a physically violent situation and obtaining the means to provide for themselves and protect their families from physical violence? Because I know what you did with these other two women and their children. You're still doing it. And this is why it's very difficult for anybody who works at these shelters to be given any more professional courtesy than the lawyers and judges that traffic women and their children for other clients that they try to keep confidential. It's confidential. See, you won't let these women have an attorney so that their information can be kept confidential. But these other attorneys, they have agreements and they get away with all kinds of side deals based on hustling women who don't have attorneys. Is that what you said when it was supposed to be confidential? And then a year after you get away with that, what else becomes confidential? And a year after you get away with that, what else becomes confidential? because nobody's talking about anything anybody needs to hear about in the state of Texas. It's not confidential. It's a crime. Now, again, I'm in a situation, I have the same appeal. I have the same appeal that has been available and ready since the end of November. And there was a very specific, or actually the 2 weeks before the end of November, before Thanksgiving. And my intention was to present it before a very important deadline in December. But in lieu of providing me with any collegiality or anything close to due process, what happens is you engage some prurient psychopathology of spying on me, and you use my efforts at legitimate legal redress for egregious crime. It's not intelligence. It's not confidential. It serves no national security purpose, as you demonstrate over and over again. It cannot be covered legitimately under any sort of justifications as a covert action. I do not accept the helmsmanship of anybody trying to wield my vessel in rem. And I'm on the record with discussing how medical professionals should understand that an intentional disturbance every 15 minutes prevents people from getting REM sleep so that they're able to recover their brains overnight while they're sleeping, and they can be healthy in their functioning the next day. See, that was the consideration of the healthcare matter. It was a healthcare related matter that there was a unnecessary security interference in people's sleep patterns after they had been identified as having a medical need, and hence were supposed to be put on medication so they were not conscious of the unnecessary security interference while they were trying to heal. That's a legitimate medical consideration. But having my rights to due process denied for several years, while other people try to volley a Supreme Court case about in rem jurisdiction of maritime vessels, and then another Supreme Court case says to kick it back to the local district courts, where they cite case law that has no actual merit in consideration of what would be a required response to the merits of the case, but comes up later when we're talking about what? The Supreme Court of the United States apparently put opinions of 3 cases out on February 3rd of 2021. You know what that is? It's 26 days later. Did you make me the USS Dallas and decide you were going to nuke me? Serious question. Under whose authority? Why would you do that? I still have my appeal. It's right here. But there's no one to appeal to. This is a crisis. This is a crisis. You have completely destroyed the foundation for identification of my national character. Nobody that masquerades as if they are representing the people of the United States of America is representing the people of the United States of America. They are in flagrant violation of the Constitution on the most fundamental levels, and it is consistent and pervasive and omnipresent that the members of the judicial branch, the members of the executive branch, and the members of the legislative branch Not just at the federal level, by the way, but at least 3 states that I've been trafficked through in the last 5 years, all have other interests that take primacy over adhering to the Constitution and their requirements to represent the people of the United States. When you go to public office, you swear on the Bible to uphold the Constitution. You guys won't even allow for a discussion of the constitutionality of having to swear on a Bible. At some point, you allowed someone else to take command of USS America, and there's no more consideration of matters like this. Everything is so derivated and abstracted. I have it right here again. But now it seems like I've been hearing for years, all that would happen is I would again give very, very high caliber crypto to local police actors. It won't even respond to a domestic violence call. It is 9:03 p.m. on February 11th, 2021. It would be within a 72-hour response period to what would be a 1 month following my request originally for a intervention in an illegal attempt at a court-martial that went horribly wrong. Where are her children? Where are her children? Why did you literally leave me with only one person to talk to for years while you trafficked her children? What kind of sadist kidnaps a woman like me, exploits her for as long as they have, gives her only one person to talk to, and then allows for that one person to put her in a situation where she has to witness this for years? It's been over a year and a half since you've been trafficking that woman and her children, specifically connected to Chevron, as part of somebody's illegal hedging on the nuclear triad. That's literally what you did. You can't cover that default. You can't just come on site and work some toxic fucking deals. How many other children do you have on your past caseload you're attempting to swap into position to take a percentage? Are you going to kick back their parents? Are you going to give credit to the lawyers of those parents? It was never probate law. And if you thought you were qualified at this level, what are you going to do now? You should have stepped down when you allowed your ass to go to Switzerland. You had no right to return and try to masquerade as if you were qualified to be in the office of the governor. You should never have returned to Texas. And every member of the Senate that refused to impeach you, every single member of the Texas Senate that refused to impeach Governor Greg Abbott last year after he went to Israel and then went to Switzerland right before we had to deal with COVID-19 needs to be impeached. That's not going to stop. Every member of the United States Senate that put up for auction the mineral rights of the people of the United States after they were illegally expropriated via a situation of illegal debt through a contrived national emergency that is actually a biological war on their own people needs to be impeached. If the members of the House of Representatives lack the character or the loyalty to understand who they serve, they need to be impeached. If the members of the Texas House of Representatives lack the character or the loyalty to understand they serve the people of the state of Texas, they need to be impeached. And every damn one of you in a robe needs to be stripped of it if you agreed to abuse your office, to traffic children, to up risk leverage, and then think you're going to get away with losing. if you're going to take it there. You don't have a right to lose. And you did. It is not our responsibility to cover up for you. You trafficked us thinking you were going to get away with it, and you lost. Who's supposed to cover that? We are not covering for what you did. You're impeached. Every damn one of you is impeached tonight. The verdict has already been delivered at your own hand, in your own name.